Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the situation in the town of Borodianka is much scarier than that in Bucha, as Russia admitted its forces had suffered major casualties. Over the past few days, grisly images of what appeared to be intentional killings of civilians carried out by Russian forces in Bucha and other towns in Ukraine before they withdrew from the outskirts of Kyiv have caused a global outcry. Speaking at his nightly address last night, Mr. Zelensky said, "So far, the Russian state and the Russian military are the greatest threat on the planet to freedom, to human security, to the concept of human rights as such. After Bucha, this is already obvious," he said, adding that work to clear rubble in Borodianka had begun. Russia suspended from UN human rights body. Rescue workers removed the rubble from a residential area on Borodianka, Ukraine, amid warnings of further civilian executions. "It's much scarier there. More victims of Russian invaders," Mr. Zelensky said. The Ukrainian president said similar atrocities were seen in Mariupol as well. What will happen when the world learns the whole truth about what the Russian military did in Mariupol? There, on almost every street, is what the world saw in Bucha and other towns in the Kyiv region after the withdrawal of Russian troops. The same cruelty. The same terrible crimes, he said. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov admitted that Russia had suffered significant losses of its troops in Ukraine. Kremlin admits significant troop losses. Mr. Zelensky was speaking after Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov admitted that Russia had suffered significant losses of its troops in Ukraine, calling the losses a huge tragedy for the country in an interview with UK Sky News. Asked whether the withdrawal of Russian troops from Kyiv and its region could be seen as a humiliation for the Kremlin, Mr. Peskov said using those words would be a wrong understanding of the situation. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba warned that despite a recent Russian pullback, the country remains vulnerable, and he pleaded for weapons from NATO to face down the coming offensive in the east. Nations from the alliance agreed to increase their supply of arms, spurred on by reports that Russian forces committed atrocities in areas surrounding the capital. Western allies also ramped up financial penalties aimed at Moscow, including a ban by the European Union on Russian coal imports, and a US move to suspend normal trade relations with Russia. Ukrainian soldiers check for booby traps as they recapture the Kyiv suburb of Bucha. Soldiers disgusting civilians. In other developments, Germany's Foreign Intelligence Service told a parliamentary committee on Wednesday that it has intercepted radio communications where Russian soldiers talked about soldiers and civilians in Ukraine, a source with knowledge of the meeting said. The briefing was the top item at the Wednesday meeting, the source added. Those intelligence findings, first reported by Der Spiegel, appear to implicate Russian troops in a pattern of apparent war crimes despite denials from Moscow, most recently in the indiscriminating of civilians in the Kyiv suburb of Bucha. Der Spiegel reported that the BND, Germany's foreign intelligence agency, intercepted Russian radio chatter about the of civilians in Bucha, and that some of the conversations could be tied directly to specific ings in Bucha that have been documented since news first emerged of an apparent there. Advancing Ukrainian soldiers found the mass grave in Bucha, on the outskirts of Kyiv, Ukraine. German intelligence has satellite images that point to the involvement of Russian troops in the Bucha-ings, the Washington Post reported, citing an unnamed intelligence official, though the paper said the radio transmissions have not been linked to that location. On Tuesday, the Security Service of Ukraine released a series of intercepted audio recordings that purport to reveal Russians receiving orders to civilians. In one of the alleged intercepts, one soldier identifies what he describes as a car carrying two civilians. "Fking them all, for FK's sake," comes the reply. Andriivka residents traumatized as village destroyed by Russians.